Good morning, everyone. We are Group 1, and our report is about the early contacts with neighboring countries. I know everyone has already encountered this topic, so let me recall this to you. But first, let me introduce myself. I am Marilyn Toro. Oral and cultural evidence show that the Philippines already had trade and cultural exchanges with its Asian and Southeast Asian neighbors. The seemingly scattered island group of people actively engage in trade and commerce with their neighbors, an exposure that further enriched the economic life and culture of the early Filipinos, early trade routes and contact. Long before the coming of the Portuguese and Spaniards to the region, the Philippines had outside trade contacts and, along with this, varied cultural exchanges took place. Ancient Filipinos were expert seafarers. They had mastered the wind and sea currents. They could travel far and wide to trade with nearby Southeast and East Asian neighbors, even as far as Champa, present-day Vietnam. The ancient Filipinos were also expert boat builders. They made all sizes and types of boats, big or small, single-hulled or outrigged. According to Filipino historians and archaeologists, trade relations between the Philippines and China first developed in the 9th century, between 618 and 906 AD, during the Tang Dynasty. They cite as evidence Tang stoneware discovered on the coast of the Babuyan Islands, Ilocos, Pangasinan, Mindoro in Puerto Galera, Batangas in Calatagan, Manila in Santa Ana, Bohol, Cebu, Jolo, and Cagayan de Oro. If the Chinese did not transport these items directly to the Philippines, they most likely arrived by the way of Borneo through Arab traders who had earlier direct trade contacts with the Chinese.
Arab trade routes in Southeast Asia between 900 and 1200 AD. A group of people called Orang Dampuan from southern Anman established trading posts in Sulu. A flourishing trade developed between Champa and the people of Sulu who were called Buranon. This trade proved favorable to the Orang Dampuans whose prosperity drew the ear of the Buranons. It was not until the 13th century that they would return to Sulu to trade peacefully once more. The famous pearl trade of Sulu also attracted another group of people known as the Banjar of nearby Borneo. Regular trade relation ensued between Sulu and Banjarmasin. The Buranons, who had not yet forgotten their tragic experience with the Orang Dampuans, were also suspicious of the Banjars. But the traders of Banjarmasin, aware of the fate of Orang Dampuans, were more diplomatic. Instead of antagonizing the Buranons, they brought their beautiful princess to Sulu and offered her as a bride to the Buranon prince, who eventually married her. Sulu thus became a tribute state of the Empire Srivijaya, along with the Banjarmasin and Brunei. Sulu developed into an emporium to which trading ships of Java, Sumatra. Arab traders who up to this point dominated the Southeast Asian trading were later buried from the central Chinese coast. These relocated to the Malay Peninsula where they caught an alternative route starting from Malacca and passing through Borneo and the Philippines to reach Taiwan. They continued to carry Southeast Asian goods to the Western world using the southern route. They also carried Philippine goods on board Arab ships to the Chinese mainland through Canton. So keen was competition that the Arab ships carried non-Chinese goods amounting to 20 to 40% of the total cargo. This lasted up to the Javanese period. The Chinese trade in the Philippines greatly improved during the Ming Dynasty. During this time, Emperor Yongle sent a fleet vessels to the Philippines under the command of Admiral Cheng Hu to visit Lingayen, Manila Bay, Mindoro, and Sulu in 1405 to 1406, 1408 to 1410, and 1417. The Chinese emperor even tried to impose its suzerainty over Luzon, however, put an end to this ambitious plan.
Good day everyone, I am Abigail Tabutabo and I'm here to report about the economic and cultural exchanges. Using the compass and sea voyage, Chinese traders competed with the Arabs from the 11th to 12th century. Sung porcelain unearthed in Santa Ana, Manila and around the Laguna de Bay attested to the success of this trade. By the 13th century, the Chinese had overtaken the Arabs in the region. Description of the lucrative trade between China and the Philippine archipelago can be found in Chao Jiakua's Chu Fan Chi in 1225, where the Chinese mentioned the following places: Maay, Mindoro or Bai in Laguna, Mintulang or Mindanao, Malilo or Manila, Sulu or Sulu, and Pishoye or Visayas. So the Philippines traded goods like bulak, abaca, hardwood, gums, resins, betel nuts, pear shells, pink and blue coral trees, large conch shells, tortoise shells, sponges, rattan, beeswax, musk, sandalwood, leather, mats, and pepper. In exchange, Chinese brought iron bars, porcelain and pottery silk, chins, black damask, java cloths, red taffeta, blue cloth, bronze gongs, small bells, mirror, coins, jade, projectiles, gold, silver, censers, lead, color glass beads, iron needles, lead sinkers for the fishing net, lacquered ware, copper cauldrons, wine, ivory, and tin. By the 12th century, gold coins or piloncitos began to be used as medium of exchange. With trade of products came cultural exchanges including religion. This in turn would influence the indigenous lifestyles, customs, and religious belief of the ancient Filipinos. This is particularly true of the influences of our language, system or writing, technology, attire, ornaments, food, and religious beliefs and practices. Much of the Chinese influence on the Filipino life is economic in nature. This is shown by the Chinese words that were adapted into language of the Philippines, particularly Tagalog. Here are some Chinese words that were adapted in the Philippines. In Chinese, ampao or Tagalog, ampao. In English, puff rice or corn. In Chinese, hebi. In Tagalog, hibi. In English, dried salted shrimps. In Chinese, kitay, Tagalog, katay, English, cut up meat. In Chinese, lipya, in Tagalog, lipya, in English, plowshare. In Chinese, hukbo, in Tagalog, hukbo, and in English is army. In Chinese, pichihay, in Tagalog, pichay, and in English, Chinese cabbage. But there are hundreds of Tagalog words which have their origin in Chinese. Most of these words have economic meanings. So the Filipinos also learned from the Chinese the use of umbrellas, porcelain, gongs, the manufacture of gunpowder, metallurgy, and mining methods. Perhaps the Filipinos also borrowed the Chinese custom of having parents arrange the marriage of their children, wearing white clothing instead of black for mourning of death of family and relatives, is also of Chinese origin, especially among the Visayans. Quite apart from the Chinese, the ancient Filipinos were also influenced by the Indians of India. The ancient Indians may not have settled in huge numbers in the Philippines, but their influence on Filipino culture may have come through the ancestors of the present Indonesians. The Malays who came to the Philippines were possibly Hinduized Malays, that is, Malays who professed the Hindu religion of India. This Indian influence is clearly seen in some of the words in the different languages of the Philippines, including Tagalog, which were derived from the Sanskrit, or the ancient language of India. Some of the Tagalog words of Sanskrit origin are the following. In Sanskrit, it is ahi, in Tagalog, ahas, and in English, snake. It is swamin in Sanskrit, Tagalog, asawa, and in English, husband or wife. In Sanskrit, baga, in Tagalog, bahagi, and in English, part or portion. In Sanskrit, varta, in Tagalog, balita, and in English, news. In Sanskrit, kuta, in Tagalog, kuta, and in English, fort. In Sanskrit, dala, in Tagalog, dala, and in English, fishing net. In In Sanskrit, ganda. In Tagalog, also ganda. And in English, it is beauty. In Sanskrit, it is hari. In Tagalog, also hari. And in English is king. In Sanskrit, lalarawa. In Tagalog, lalawa. And in English is spider. In Sanskrit, tara. In Tagalog, tala. And in English is star. Sanskrit words or their variations are also found in Visayan and Magindanaon languages. Such words as agama or religion, pandita, priest or scholar, tumbaga or copper, paginda or emperor, sutra or silk are of Sanskrit origin. Several deities in the myths of the ancient Filipino show traces of Indian influences. Indra Batara, Lord of the Universe, Idiyanali, god of agriculture, Agni, god of fire. A figurine of the Hindu goddess Padmapani was found in Butuan and was dated to 300 AD. This could attest to the ancient contact between the Philippines and the Indian subcontinent. Also, the Philippine Catholic wedding ceremony has Indian influences. The use of the cord and the veil during the Catholic marriage ceremony in the Philippines is Indian in origin. It is not originally Western or Spanish Catholic because of the non-Philippine Catholic marriage has no veil and cord ceremonies. So this is the Laguna copper plate and it was discovered in the Pagsanhan Laguna River Delta in 1986. It is another evidence of this early Philippine contact with its Southeast Asian neighbors, particularly the Malays and Indonesians. Dated till 900 AD, the copper plate contains an inscription in an old Philippine language, stating the full payment of a loan of date by a woman trader from her contacts in the nearby Indonesia. The copper plate also shows shared knowledge in metallurgy and its use in trade and commerce to record transactions as certificate of credit and loan payment. The coming of Islam. After Muhammad's death in 632 AD, Islam spread outside the Arabia in two stages. The first stage is the Islam was brought to the rest of the Middle East, Northern Africa, Spain, and Central Asia. And the second stage is the Muslim missionaries traveled with Arab merchants to India, China, and to Southeast Asia. So a number of them settled in Southeast Asia where they intermarried with members of the royalty. They also set up mosques and madrasa or schools. In the Philippines, Islam was introduced by Tuan Mashaika, a trader from Malaya, and his companion Tuan Makbalo, who came to Sulu in the 1240s. And according to Sulu genealogy called Tarsila, his wealth increased and with it, the status of Muslims in the communities was raised. By 1380, when a missionary from Java, Karim ul Makdum, arrived in Buansa or Sulu, he found a thriving Muslim community that welcomed him and his efforts to strengthen Islam around the mosque he built in Tubig, Indangan, Tawi-Tawi. 10 years later, in 1480, Raja Baginda arrived from Sumatra. He further deepened Islamic consciousness among the Muslims in Sulu by building more madrasas in the area. He later rose to position of power in Tin Sulu. But it was Abu Bakr who married Raja Baginda's daughter Parami Suli, who succeeded in establishing a government similar to the Sultanate of Arabia. Meanwhile, in Maguindanao, or in present day called Cotabato and Lanao, Serif Kabungsuan arrived from Johor, now a state of West Malaysia, and converted many inhabitants to Islam. He became the first Sultan of Maguindanao. So rapid was the spread of Islam that when the Spaniards first arrived in 1570, they found Manila and nearby places with Muslims' connections. The rulers of the Kingdom of Manila were found to be related by blood and marriage to the royal house of Muslim Brunei. That's all. Thank you for listening.
So hi, good morning everyone, especially to you, sir. So I am Lalina Lahato and I will be the reporter for the teaching of Islams as well as the Sultanate. So let me go ahead and start. So for the teachings of Islam, the basic tenets of Islam are found in the Quran, the holy book of the Muslims. Written in Arabic, the Quran is considered the word of the Supreme Creator Allah, directly communicated by the angel to the Prophet Muhammad. So as you can see in the screen, this is a picture of a Quran, which is the Islamic sacred book believed to be the Word of God as dictated to Muhammad by the Archangel Gabriel, written down in Arabic, which consists of 114 units of varying lengths, known as surahs, as part of the ritual prayer. This touched upon all aspects of human existence, including matters of doctrine, social organization, and legislation. So, mm, as you can see here, everyone, in the teaching of Islam, there is a book. So yeah, this is the example of the holy book. So next, these are the following teachings for the Quran. So the first one is there is one and only supreme being, Allah, the creator of universe and all of the humankind. So which is the one and only God in Islam. Next, Allah is just a merciful God, and it is Allah's desire that all should repent their sins, purify themselves, so they could enter paradise after that. This basically means to ask forgiveness of a person who has been wronged by him, physically or verbally, to make a firm resolve of avoiding the sin in the future. Means of closer to Allah and purifying themselves. Next, life in this world is only temporary, and one's good deeds as well as the bad deeds are listed by an angel for financial judgment on the last day of the entire humanity. So each one will be judged according to what one has done in his lifetime. Next, the Quran forbids any human or animal representation in their art. Only geometric patterns are allowed. So it merely condemns idolatry. Living beings ultimately stems from the beliefs that the creation of living form is unique to God. Number 5, the eating pork, drinking wine, gambling, and other vices are forbidden in Orthodox Islam, because Allah prohibits eating the flesh of swine because it is a sin and can be impity, which means a lack of pity or reverence, especially for God. So, like, it is disrespect for the sacred. So, let me go ahead and go to the next. So, the number 6 is the Islam's forbids loans and usury. So, like trade is usury, and God has permitted trade and forbidden usury, the illegal action of lending money and in an unreasonable sorry unreasonably high rates of interest. And next, number 7, Muslims are duty bound to help the poor, orphans, and widows. The Prophet said, if you want to soften your heart, then feed the poor and pat the head of the orphan, whether you welcome an orphan in your own home or sponsor a child in a loving home. You will gain the reward of keeping the child in a loving, caring environment. So, whoever feeds someone who is hungry will have his sins forgiven. Next, telling lies, stealing, adultery, and murders are all grave sins that deserve serious punishments. So, which is a moral sins because of the unrighteous is punished, but the punishment of the grave is not mentioned in the Quran, so I won't mentioning about this one too. Next is every Muslims have goodness expressed in faith in God and such virtues as patience, faithfulness, honesty, honor, and courage. Yeah. And next, for the lastly, a follower of Allah has to observe the following rituals or obligations and declarations of faith in one's God. That is Shahada. For example, Muslims pray facing Mecca 5 times a day, at dawn, noon, mid-afternoon, sunset, and after that, dark. Mhm. And the obligations and the the obligations of Islam's, there are five duties on every Muslims. The Shahada, the Muslim profession of faith, Salat or prayer performed in the prescribed manner, five times each day, Zakat, the alms tax divide, to benefit the poor and needy. Sawn is for fasting during the month of Ramadan, and Hajj, the fifth fundamental practices and institutions known as the five pillars of Islam. So that would be the teachings of the Quran. So I'll be going ahead and talk about the next topic, which is the Sultanate. So the Sultanate governed a much larger territory through a centralized network of officials with a sultan at the top. So, meaning, sultan is a king or a sovereign, especially of a Muslim state. So basically, is the head of the state and of the government. And in his words were the law. So only responsible to Allah and God's law, known as the Sharia. So sultan with royal or Arab ancestry. Next is the Ruma Vichara, a council of elder composed of dates. So Roma Vichara is the house of the discussion, a royal council made of the nobles datus, which Roma means sinama and Malay for house, and Vichara to speak or to discuss. So the other officials, the wait first ministers or the dato, Maharaja Accostant chiefs, Raha Laut is the chief of the seas, and Kadi chief interpreter of the Muslims adopts traditions, and the law in the Muslims court, the Sharia. So I guess that is the end of the discussion. So I hope you understand. Thank you very much for listening. Have a great day.